So yeah, Mansi is going to talk about this slide. Okay. So yeah, Mansi is still going to talk here. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Mansi. So yeah, my name is Devansh Jain. I am a former engineer and product manager. I'm currently the founder of Nokaroshi, which is a product, which is an incubator. And yeah, I'm basically in the middle of my startup founder journey and trying to figure out what to do. But that's one of the things that I really care about is kind of helping other people become better product people and introducing kind of good product technique in the startup kind of ecosystem. So that's a little bit about me. So what's kind of the plan for today? We're going to first talk about objectives, what we aim to get out of the call. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about why I picked these specific tools to talk about, and yeah, why I think that was a good choice. There's some bonus material, and then I'm actually going to talk about jobs to be done and user story mapping, and so talk about those two tools. And then there's some bonus material at the end, which I've been told we might have an issue watching, but it'll be there for you later if you decide that's something you want. And we're going to do a couple of exercises and look at some examples of places where these two tools have been used. And in terms of questions, there is some designated time at the end of each section, but in the middle, if you have a question, if there's something that you are not sure about or want to dig deeper into, please do that. We're a small enough group that we can take some detours and do that. And there should be plenty of time. So feel free to ask questions whenever. Okay, assuming there's nothing else, let's start. So what are the objectives? Why are we here today? So from what I understand, y'all are like employed in kind of non-tech verticals, but with an exposure to tech. And you're interacting somehow with digital products. And so the goal here kind of is for you to understand these two essential aspects of product discovery. One is jobs to be done, and the other is user story mapping. And then you'll be able to sort of apply either because you know what it is, how it's used, and when to use it. And then also, if you want to dig deeper, you can talk. We'll talk a little bit about why it helps. Like, what are the principles that this kind of these things operate on, and why are they actually effective? And that'll give you room to play around with how you implement them and know whether it's the right kind of situation where it's going to be a useful tool. And also there's some resources at the end. So if you want to dig deeper into either of these, you can certainly do that. So in some senses, our entire job is prioritizing. There's always too much to build with product. Even the stuff that you have to build that, yeah, most of your ideas are wrong, according to Marty Kagan. And even the ones that are right take a bunch of iterations to get to a state where people kind of enjoy them. And so the goal is to figure out what do we build first. And the reason the trash can is bigger is that there's a lot of ideas that are actually not worth building, that aren't going to add value to our customer. And so how do we discover what they are? So using these two tools, hopefully you'll get a good sense of how you can make this prioritization easier. And there's a great article by Lenny that I can also, it's called Prioritizing at Startups, but there's a lot of literature about that as well. So that's the objectives. So why are we focusing on these two aspects of product discovery, right? So let's start with, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to build products that add value to people's lives and also work for our business, right? That's kind of our goal, is to make sure that our customers are happy and that they're happy in a way that is actually sustainable and useful for business. So kind of what are the steps that you need to take this to get here, right? To this kind of outcome. Is first you need to understand what the user wants and needs. Without that, it's really hard to build something that's going to help them in any way. Then you need to figure out what you can actually build that will solve that problem for them. Then you need to kind of actually build the thing. And these are two separate steps. And so that's kind of discovery, that's kind of delivery. Make that thing available for them to download and use. then you get them to use that thing. And then hopefully after all of that, you make some money. So the way this breaks down is kind of that these first two steps are discovery, then there's delivery, there's acquisition, and there's monetization. I don't know if this is a complete model, I just kind of made this up. But the thought is that jobs to be done will help you with the first part. And user story mapping is the first part of the figuring out what you need, figuring out what will satisfy, figuring out what to build, right? And actually the reason that it's also useful in delivery as well. I haven't mentioned that here, but it's also useful in delivery. So I think that'll be kind of a very useful, it's a very useful and versatile tool. Just learning about it made me a much better product manager. And so, I'm sharing it with the hopes that it has the same kind of impact for you. So those are the two tools. They're firmly rooted in discovery. Jobs to be done helps you understand what the user wants and needs, or why they're trying to hire this product, what outcome they're looking for. And user story mapping will set us up for the discovery, for the prototyping and that kind of phase. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go read the design book, which is just a lovely, lovely book and is so good for product iteration. It's called Sprint, and hopefully it'll be in the section below as well. So with that, let's dive into jobs to be done. And so again, the goal of the jobs to be done is, so what is jobs to be done? The official definition is here. Let's take maybe a moment to read it. So yeah, that's the official definition. It's wordy, but it'll make sense, I think, hopefully at some point. I have a somewhat simpler kind of understanding, which is it's the approach of understanding the user's wants and needs as the first step to creating a solution for them. And the way that you do that is by asking, what job is the user trying to do here? Or what outcome is the user really looking for here? And so it's really, you're putting on these glasses and trying to look at the world from the user's perspective and see what is really driving them to potentially hire a product or a service to do some kind of work for them. So let's talk about an example, right? That seems kind of vague. Even when I heard about jobs to be done, I always felt it's kind of vague. So the classic example is these bunch of consultants were hired to improve milkshakes for like a fast food chain. And so they called these focus groups and they asked them, how do you like the milkshake? Some user personas with a given demographic background. And they asked them, how would you make this better? And, they got some responses, or make it maybe chocolatier, like make it bigger, something like that. And they did all those things, and then sales went nowhere. And so then they brought in some consultants, and then the consultants decided, okay, let's figure out why are people like, who's actually buying milkshakes and why are they buying them? Like, what job are they hiring the milkshake to do? And so they went in and they figured out that actually half of the sales for milkshakes happen before 8 a.m. And it's normally single people who are kind of, come in, buy them, and then leave immediately. They're often alone. And so they came up with this kind of interesting insight. And then they went and interviewed some of these people, and they asked them, why are you buying this milkshake? And basically, like, what job are you hiring the milkshake to do? And so the answer that they got was some variation of, I have a long commute in the morning, and I'm kind of bored in that commute, and I'm also kind of hungry in the morning, right? And I'm going to get to work, and I know I'm going to be hungry when I get to work. And so it's really something that entertains me, gives me something to do in the car, and then also fills me up, right? And the way that they asked, and they also asked, like, what other kind of solutions have you tried to hire to do this job? And they said, bananas don't really work. I tried them, but they didn't, fill me up. And bagels kind of crumble and, need application of condiments. Donuts are just like, super sugary and also just spilled everywhere and hard to eat. Got sugar all over my face. And so by looking at the examples, at the other examples of things that people had tried to hire, they got a good sense of what it was that they were trying to do. And once you have this understanding, it becomes a lot easier to make your product better, right? You can think about, like, what is the user feeling when they're coming there? They're hungry, they're in a hurry. Can you enable pre-ordering for them? Can you have it ready? Can you make sure your machines don't break down? Can you maybe improve the design of the cup to make it more easy to consume in the car? Something like that. Can you put a cup holder so maybe their hands don't get cold? So once you have a clear example or a clear idea of what people are trying to hiring that thing to do, it becomes a lot easier to understand their motivations and what they're really looking for from that product, and to be able to craft a more kind of fitting solution to their need, right? And so then what they ended up doing here was actually differentiating and making like a different, and then there was a competing job to be done, and they made a different solution for that. So that's a classic example, and there's a really good explanation in that link over there. Something that I've experienced personally was once I was working with this company, and there was an executive who kept asking. So we were continuously building reports into the system, and one engineer's kind of solo job was to build reports, and none of them were being run. Essentially, they were being run once and then never again. And so when we noticed this, I went and tried to figure out like why, and the requirements were coming from like basically one executive. And I was trying to, and so then I was like, okay, what is going on here? Like, why is this, like, what job is this person hiring this report to do? And that person was not happy because the reports were taking a week to make it to production, and he wasn't getting kind of the reports in the way that he wanted. And so what it turned out was there was a monthly meeting of leadership, and they needed to present certain numbers. And actually, that person had just been in such a senior position in the bank, or in his previous role, that that he was just not used to using Excel anymore. And what he was used to is asking people on his team to create a report for him. And so that was what he was asking for from the engineer. And the engineer didn't realize this was like a one-time thing. He needed just like a small difference in computation, or things were just columns being changed or things like that. And so he was going and modeling like a new report in the system. But really all it needed was for once a month, someone to go in and just like write Excel macros. And the irony is that the developer didn't know how to write Excel macros. So it never occurred to him to just, dig and do this. But once we understood what the job was, which is give me, at every executive report, when people ask me for like a different format or like a new piece of information, just add that to the report that I'm running on the base set of queries. And so we were able to just create macros and edit them by hand. And that kind of solved the problem. So just, and the goal is, and sort of the takeaway is, ask what job that person is hiring that thing to do. Don't assume, don't just go by kind of what they're saying. Dig into what their needs are, and what kind of outcome they're hoping for. Like, what is the real context in which that object is being used, and what is it trying to accomplish, right? In this case, it was make me like, look good in a report, in a meeting with leadership, right? That was the job. And so get me numbers quickly, get me numbers accurately, but not create multiple templates. I'm never going to use this again, right? I don't really care if it's in the system or not. Like, even if you have to do it by hand, it's fine. It doesn't need to be scalable at all. But understanding that context is how we were able to make that call, and then deprioritize all of these reports and just like move them out to a different department. Yeah. Any questions, thoughts? Okay. All right. How do you use jobs to be done? So in the example that we saw, there's three kind of questions to dig into, right? One is, what other things are people using to solve this problem? So in the example of the milkshake, people were using it was not a burger. It was not a competitor's milkshake. It was not a cup of coffee, right? Those are not substitutes. By looking at the substitutes, other food items, and understanding that the reason that they weren't fired was because they fell short on one of those two needs, which is either entertainment or whatever, food, nutrition. That's why they were failing. And so that gives you a lot of context into what the real job is, because other competing solutions are being evaluated by the same parameters, right? And whether they're failing or not will give you a good sense into what those parameters are. First thought. So this is a really interesting one. So the idea here is you're digging into where was the user when the first, so what you're trying to do is dig back into behavior, right? And while there's a surface level ask to surface, to dig deeper and understand what the kind of underlying need is. And so one good way to do this is actually to walk the user back in the timeline and try to get a good sense of when was the first time that they thought, oh, this thing is a problem, right? Because that understanding changes. And at some point, what might happen is the user will come upon some kind of, solution and then ask for that solution. But your job is to kind of dig and understand what the need is so you can be more creative in the solution than maybe your customer is able to articulate. And so digging back into, what were you feeling when you decided to book an Uber, right? What time of day was it? Were you alone? Were you with friends? What did you do after? What did you do before? How were you feeling at that time? And so these kind of questions are really good in terms of pointing you at what need was there within the user. Broader context. So these are the kind of questions that, were you alone? Were you with people? Was it in the context of work? Was it in your own personal time? And so just trying to piece together what the user has felt and thought that they needed through the journey from the time that they had the first thought. Are there other stakeholders involved? Things like that. So these are three kind of good questions. Okay. Another thing is look for strong feelings, either positive or negative, right? Strong feelings either show that a need is being met or a need is not being met if the feeling is negative, right? Either way, they're surfacing a need. There's one really good story, which is from a Google design sprint. And they were working with this multinational company that had CEOs in all different countries. And every 2 to 3 years, they would hire a new CEO from within the local within that country network. And the problem that they were having was there was a lot of employee attrition. Like senior leadership would then quit following the appointment of a new CEO because they realized that there was no scope for them to then occupy that position for the next 2 to 3 years. And so they were trying to come up with a solution as to how do we structure that conversation so that it has a positive outcome. And so they got together, they did a design sprint, again, based on that book that I mentioned earlier. And none of the solutions that they thought would work actually ended up working. And so they were super disappointed. They're like, oh, we tried all these cool new things, but none of them stuck. And the facilitator then asked, was there anything that was giving off like a lot of, like, was there any energy in the room? And kind of the thought there was, they were like, oh, whatever, like, is this some hokey California thing or something? And he's like, no. Were there strong emotions in any room? And they're like, yeah, there were lots and lots of negative emotions. He's like, great. Okay, let's talk about those. Because when people feel bad when their needs aren't met. But if there's a moment where people are feeling bad, it means that you have surfaced a need. Like something has come to the fore. You're not able to, give it satisfactory, like a satisfactory solution, but something is there. And so that's a good sign that you should follow and see like what needs of the user are important in that moment. One kind of example, like, really trivial example. I was helping someone yesterday with their onboarding and they were asking a lot of onboarding questions. And I was not happy because I didn't know why they were asking those questions. I don't know if you've ever experienced something like this, where you sign up to an app and suddenly there's a lot of questions and you're like, there's a feeling of almost like, it's a little creepy, right? Like, why are you asking me all this stuff? And so there's a need, there. What's the need there? It's to kind of be in control of your data, feel secure, feel safe at the end of the day, right? Like, I don't want some bad actor just like running off in my city and my date of birth and, whatever, all this stuff. That's the kind of need there. And so once you surface that, then you can try and figure out how can we make this whole experience better for them, right? How to use it in a more practical sense. If you go to a new company and you ask for like customer problem statements, sometimes some companies will have these needs and objectives captured as opportunities or themes. And so you can do the same depending on what vocabulary that organization uses. And that's also a good kind of place to see if any kind of work has been done, is to just look for like generic, like where have you captured user needs, right? What is important to user? And if you do this exercise, this is how you can create, like these are kind of what the artifacts would be called. once you codify them. And so this is how you would integrate them into a roadmap or something like that. Questions? All right, cool. So that's how to use it. Now, when do you use it, right? You need to know, yeah. Oh, by the way, does anyone know? Yeah. How to use it? Because I don't know if anybody knows what happens in the scene next, but given that it's Homer, you can maybe predict that. So don't use them wrong. When should you use it? You can use it anytime you're trying to figure out where a user is coming from. When a user is acting in a way that you didn't expect them to act. One kind of really basic use case is when you're developing a new product and you want to really understand what the user's been doing so far. This is a good tool. When users tell you something and then you build it for them and then they don't use it, that's a good sign that you should try and figure out what's really going on. And when users are misusing a product, this is a really good one. If people use your products in ways that you didn't expect, follow that, because there's some job to be doing that they had that you didn't realize you could actually help them with. And now you have a great opportunity to kind of make that flow easier for them within your existing product. So those are some of the times you should use it. Essentially, when you're trying to understand, why users are acting the way they're doing, or yeah. So that's how you can do it. I think we have some more examples now. Yeah. So the housing development companies. This was a company that was selling condos, and they were selling it to people who were downsizing from kind of single family homes. And they were finding that their sales weren't going as well as hoped. And so they spoke to a few people, they did some demographic user persona kind of segmentation, spoke to some users, couldn't get a clear pattern on why people were buying or not buying. Then they were not buying. And then they dug into people who were buying, and they asked them, can you talk us through what was going on when you took this decision? Like, what were the circumstances? What were you feeling? Like, what was it? What were your kind of big triggers there? And something that they came upon is when people figured out what to do with their dining table is when they decided to pull the trigger and make a purchase. And so this is like a strange one, right? Like, what does a dining table have to do with buying a new house? The story that picture kind of tells is that dining tables are these really kind of, when you're going to downsize from a big house to like a condo or an apartment, you're going to give up a lot of stuff, right? You'll have to give to goodwill, to other family members, all that stuff. But the dining table has special kind of emotional value because there are all these shared kind of cherished memories. People were not feeling comfortable making the decision to downsize unless they knew what was going to happen there. Either it fits into their condo or one of their family members takes it. They didn't want to just sell it and get rid of it, right? They wanted to hang on to that. And following that a little further, what the condo company realized is that they were actually in the business of helping people transition from one phase of life to the other, right? That's what they were hiring them to do is, I, am now getting older. I actually can't take care of my house maybe really well. I don't really need the space because maybe my kids have moved out. I have a bunch of stuff in the house though. And now I'm trying to figure out what comes next for me, right? And there's like, what are the emotions that are attendant to that, right? And what are the needs there? I can imagine something like, apprehension, fear of what's going to happen to your life, and whether you're going to be able to figure it all out, how you're going to adjust into this new home with all of your stuff. And really the need was to feel secure and safe and cared for, right? And so what the company did was they started understanding these kind of other needs. They offered 2 years of free storage and then also like a big sorting room. So when you moved into the building, you could bring all of your stuff with you. And then you had a little bit of time to sort out and figure out where things went in your new place and what you wanted to get rid of and that kind of stuff. And the last thing that they did was actually like redesign some of the apartments so they could take a slightly larger dining table. And then they had like tremendous sales, and the cost, they actually marked up their products in comparison to what they had earlier, but they were still able to recover the cost of all these other amenities. And just another success story there of how differently you look at the problem once you understand what your users are trying to do, why they're hiring you, what job is it that you're really trying to do for the user, what are the alternatives. For a lot of these retirees, it was just don't move, right? So yeah, it's good to understand your alternatives as well. So that's the example of the housing development company. Okay, This is a really nice one. So what we've seen a few times is that people have tried unsuccessfully to use user personas to figure out why people are behaving the way they're behaving, right? And I just want to say, like, yeah, what I'm suggesting here is that you actually use jobs to be done in conjunction with user personas and use that to refine them further. The reason being that you can use the same product and have very different needs and have a very different job that you're hiring that product to do at different times. One kind of maybe shared experience that we all have is using Uber or Lyft or whatever, some kind of app, ride hailing app. And so these are all contexts in which I've used it. And so I'm just going to talk about kind of the different jobs that I had. So once I had I had an interview like early in the morning, and I had to get there on time. And so I called an Uber. And what I was looking for there was, I didn't really care about cost that much. It was super important that I get there on time. I did care about punctuality. I wanted to get there quick. I wanted to take the shortest route to the office, and please don't take whatever, don't get caught in traffic, whatever, quickest way. Some silence maybe would have been nice. I was trying to get in a good headspace, and be kind of prepared for when I went in. Though that may be different for different people, right? But that's it. And then another time, it's like when you're coming home after like a night of going out, you probably want like Ubers, it's a very different job to be done. You're hiring in the first instance to get you somewhere on time. The other one is it's kind of a continuation of the party, right? If you're traveling with your friends, maybe you want nice music playing in the car, some water maybe would be nice. These kind of nice lights might create that party mood. So even if it's the same user, their needs are now very different. This car and this driver probably won't have worked for them early in the morning, right? And then the last one is when you're traveling in a new city. I used to love taking Uber pools everywhere because you would just get to drive around in the city and see it and hear what other people in the city were up to. And so I had no kind of problem with how long it took. Like I had nothing, I had to go back to the hotel. And so I was super happy to be driven all over the city. The cost, depending on where I was and all that stuff, could matter, could not matter as much. Time didn't matter at all. Yeah, and I was, it's a very different kind of job. So even with the same user, you can refine their product journey depending on what kind of job they're trying to do. And this is applicable, obviously, to this kind of B2C use case, but also to B2B use cases. So let's say you have like a team lead in your company, right? Let's say you're selling some enterprise software. You have multiple roles, but this person occupying a single role may actually have different jobs to be done at different times, right? For an administrator, sometimes it could be, this is my monthly kind of thing. And so all I want to do is run the reports. That could be one job to be done, like keep me, and then compliance could be a different one. And, billing could be a different one. And so recognizing that one user can have multiple needs, different needs at different times, and actually doing some kind of cohort basing user grouping based on not only their demographic information and their profile, but also the job that they're looking to be done, because there might be similarities there. So I think this is a really powerful thing. User personas are already something that we use quite often. And so that's a good kind of entry point to also understand, does the user persona correspond to jobs to be done, or is there some nuance there that we can uncover by thinking about users and their needs in this way? How does it help? So yeah, this is a fairly basic one. This is how you understand what success looks like. Frequently, KPIs, or there's certainly like a set of products where what you want to do is help the user get value from your product, right? And so let's say in Uber, like a really good KPI could be the number of cabs booked, or the number of cabs booked by a person in a single month or a single year. But understanding what a completed job looks like will help you also figure out what success for your user looks like in your product. And a good way to kind of build that into your process is to make it actually one of your KPIs. So that's something you'll see happening as well sometimes. And in that case, you really don't want to get your job to be done wrong. Have a greater ability to play within, oh, right, wait, I have pictures. Yeah, success. Have a greater ability to play within solution space. So again, this is an example of like a more extreme example of the use case we saw earlier. where, these two kind of solutions are available with the same company at the same time. Potentially the same user could use it, but obviously a very different context and a very different job to be done when they would hire these different solutions. But having a very keen understanding of what those jobs are allows organizations to create, innovative, new, differentiated solutions based on those different jobs. And then the last thing is just like long-term solution agnostic thinking. The reason behind this is that needs don't actually change that much. There's this basic set of needs, and there's a link to those as well. Feelings and needs. If you're ever like, not sure what a need sounds like or what a feeling sounds like, I would really encourage you to take a look at those. It's really good. And so needs are fairly stable, but solutions can obviously change over time. New technology becomes available. How do you make sure that kind of you stay relevant, right? And staying focused on the user needs, on the stable user needs, allows you, again, this is almost like a thing on the solution space. As new solutions become available, you can expand and make those available to your users as well. Why does it help? This is a really keen one. So this is about diving deeper and understanding what principles are at work that make this work, right? What makes jobs to be done effective? So the first one is just in the way that the idea is structured. It's kind of pointing you towards the user's needs and feelings. Like, go find out what they really want, right? Don't just take the surface level answer for it. And so just built into this thing is like, you have to care about the user and not use this at all, right? And so that's kind of an inbuilt feature about jobs to be done. Okay, this Zoom thing is actually hiding this, and my laptop is frozen. Clearly, why is my laptop being like this? All right, interesting one. Yeah, feelings and needs are the basis of all behavior. The reason we do stuff is like, to meet some kind of need. And the better you can understand drivers, the more effectively you can help. And so these are some kind of needs that people will have. This is a fairly like bold point, but yeah, this is how my current thinking goes. If in doubt about user behavior, ask what job is the user trying to do. This is basically like what you need to take away from this is, if you're not sure why someone's doing something, ask what job are they trying to do? What needs do they have right now? What feelings kind of are being created through that need being met or not being met, and use those to guide yourself in understanding what it is that the user is really looking for in that moment. Questions? Any questions? No, but please have questions. All right. So actually, before we do this, let's do a little let's take a little time out. I've been talking for a while. Let's just take like a few deep breaths. This is normally the time in the presentation when I start speaking too quickly. So let's just do this and, give ourselves a little break, maybe just stretch and okay. So we talked about user story, jobs to be done, and how they're an effective way, how that's an effective lens to try and figure out what the needs are. So now let's say you have a good idea of what the needs are. Then what happens next? Or you've been put onto a new project and you don't know how to kind of, understand the product, whatever, let's talk about it. So what's the official definition? Let's take a second to read it. Sure, so that's the official definition. It kind of makes sense. My definition is, it's basically a flow chart which visually describes how a user moves through an experience. So this can be in the context of how they're doing some kind of flow now, how you envision them doing some kind of flow. It could be used for any kind of users. You can, and so maybe let's just do an exercise, which is what this picture is reminding us to do. And actually, let's just go create one. And so the prompt here is, so let's just take a product, any product that you use, that you may be very familiar with, that hopefully a lot of us are familiar with, and let's just put together a user story map. And this will hopefully give you a good sense of how you create one. So anyone want to give me a product? Okay, so there's some kind of user, they log on. Okay, then what happens? Okay, let's say it's Tinder. Yeah. Let's say it's I don't know let's say it's email, right? So you log in, you create a draft, like write, compose new email. Okay, and then what do? You send it, and then the other person gets it. That could be one. And so yeah, maybe. So when you log in, what are the other steps you have to do? So when you log in, you have to like pick a username, pick a password. Maybe you have to enter your name or something, something like that. Compose a new email. You have to like click whatever, like compose or something, and then you type into the body, type body, and then you type the subject, and then you like maybe pick a recipient. Then you send the email. So, that's it. You just hit send. I think that's it. There's nothing to that. The other person gets it. I guess that's the end of your flow, but yeah, some other person gets it. They read your message or it lands in their inbox. They see their inbox. I guess they see your message, open your message, read your message. Something like that, right? So this is for the send email flow. We could do something similar for an email flow. Yeah, so what we've done here is we started off with like, what is the user, the user wants to like tell someone something. So then they log in. Oh, this is actually sign up or something. Maybe there's a different one. Yeah, okay, sure. And this will go over there, and then there's different login stuff. Yeah, so what we did was we went left to right and in kind of chronological order of what the user is going to do. And then for each step, we added in details. So what the user has to do, you could do other stuff like now you can go deeper, right? So when you pick a password, you could think about, are there any kind of like validations we're going to apply? And you could basically like add any level of detail. You could add mocks here to show how you're thinking the user might do this. You could add kind of technical things that you care about. Oh crap, it's not recording, is it? I think I'll have to share my whole screen. And now it will record here. Yeah. Pick a recipient, there might be multiple recipients, you need to handle for that, BCC, CC, all that stuff. Type body, then we'd have to think about, what kind of formats, fonts, can they import multimedia, all this kind of stuff. For subject, is there anything we maybe don't allow there? For clicking compose, that seems fairly easy. Maybe just make the button visible. Open inbox, okay, we can't really do anything with that. They see your message. I mean, maybe you could send them a notification, but depending on whether they're on outside or not. They see your message, so maybe you want to make it clear that it's from you. Maybe surface the subject and that kind of stuff. But this is they open your message, and so maybe what we can do on our end is make sure that we're sending parameters the way that their email service is expecting them, right? And then maybe they reply, and this user story map can go on and on. So we go sequentially. Does this sound right to you, by the way? Like, is there any stuff here that you think I'm missing? Oh, okay, great. All right. So what we've done here is basically like log what the user does across the screen. We've gone into more details downwards. We have some kind of context about who the user is and what they want. And now we're free to dig deeper into any of these. We can add technical considerations. We can add legal stuff. If there's any like whatever GDPR, whatever. So this is kind of like a high level base, and then we can go into any level of depth that we want. So that's kind of what a user story map looks like, right? So it's a flow chart which visually describes how a user moves through an experience, which then you can kind of add and do other stuff too. So let's just look at some more examples of user story maps. This is one that I made a little while ago. It was just on a call, and maybe I should just put some kind of layer on this so it's not so visible. But yeah, it can be made by hand. It can be really simple. This is something that's from the design book that I mentioned a couple of times. And so, yeah, even something as complex as, medical trials can be boiled down into a very, very simple thing. And so what they've done here is they had multiple users. And so they listed the users on the left, and then they did the same kind of thing. This is a really complex one. This is, all these materials are taken from Jeff Patton, who initially has written a book about user story mapping and has a fantastic YouTube video that will also be in the links below. It's really, really good. That is my one of my favorite product resources. I would really recommend it. And it basically boils down the whole book, so it's totally worth it. So this is a complex one. This comes from some Brazilian multimedia company, and so they had a lot going on, lots of products that work with each other. You can use story maps to do other things like plan out releases. So let's say, we have all these, maybe we don't want password validation for first release, so we can just make a line on our user story map. Let's say we can just put in a line here. Where are the lines? Yeah, there we go. And then we can just call this our release 1, release 2, and then we can splice, decide, oh, is this something we want here? No, okay, put it back up, that kind of stuff. So you can do that. So you can have your first releases. Ideally, you want to have kind of the outcome that the user is looking, like the target market and the outcome. So that's something that will be informed by jobs to be done. And they can be physical. And so again, you can recognize a similar pattern where, the main flow is going across the top, and then there's details to whatever level of depth you want them there. So this is one way in which they help. They create shared understanding, right? Even with this exercise and the one we did earlier, the problem is that we can talk about things, hear the same words, agree that we all understand, but then actually have different images in our head of what those words mean. And so what user story mapping forces you to do is write stuff down, talk about it, put it in boxes, make it sequential. And when that happens and you're kind of doing this exercise in a shared way, it becomes very obvious when there's misalignments there. And so what you do is, then you talk about it some more and draw it out and get your shapes kind of all fit together. And then you walk away, hopefully, with the same image in everyone's head. Does this look familiar at all to you? So it's a user story map, right? This is your job to be done is kind of have a shared understanding, and user story maps are a way to get there. Yeah, you can apply user story maps to user story maps. It's awesome. Recursive product tools. Yeah, user story maps can be useful in half an hour. So this is an example that I made recently, and there was a client. I had a new client, and they, I wanted to just understand what was going on in their application. They didn't really have anything they could share with me, and so what I did was just like told them, okay, so split it up into pre-acquisition, post-acquisition. So this is, and by the way, you can use jobs to be done really, really effectively on your acquisition channel as well. And there's a link to a little video where I talk about how Madman does it, but that could be a whole kind of thing on its own. There's a really good first round article called Language Market Fit, which you might really like as well. So yeah, so I asked this person, the CEO, to kind of walk me through the entire product. They did. I added screenshots, I added emails that were going out, and we discovered kind of what are all the steps the user needs to get to value. There's some kind of step happening here for the employer. Maybe there's some close of the loop there as well. And then obvious patterns start to emerge. Okay, so we have 3 entry points, like we have multiple entry points to the same thing. Is that desirable? From this, there's 2 or 3 completely different paths that kind of end. Do we want to investigate those? Which part of this whole thing do we care about? Do we care about acquisition? Do we care about retention and getting like a better experience for our users? Is there some specific, kind of thing that, like, is there like these sections that are actually where we're having the most drop off, where's our biggest risk? Where can we create delight for users? All of those conversations become possible once you have a good high level view of the product. And, it's so easy. This took half an hour, and it depends on what happens when you go into engagements, right? Sometimes I find either they throw like a bunch of documentation at you and you can't make heads or tails of it. And, you want to cry when you see the huge manuals, which are anyway out of date. Or, they don't have any documentation at all in some cases, maybe not the case for you guys, but definitely happens in startup land. Or they have some understanding of the product, which is wrong. And they'll just like verbally tell it to you, but then actually doing this kind of exercise will really help make sure that once you write something down, it's a lot easier to correct it than it is for someone to say the truth, kind of like, so, and then you can do this with multiple people and with entire teams. And so you can make sure, like, if there's like a, sometimes people don't even know there's a different section of the product that does the same thing that they're trying to build, right? Like happens quite a lot. So this could be a tool for addressing that as well. So that's a personal example. Right, user story mapping. When do I use it? How do I use it? So when should you use it? Basically, when you're trying to understand either like a product, either one that already exists or one that you're thinking about making. And so just understanding what that product looks like, what are the different screens, what are the different flows, how does a user get from where they start to some kind of, job being accomplished for them. And whether that's even the case, like many times you'll do a user story map and you're like, oh, actually, we didn't build the part where the user actually gets to the flow. This happened recently as well. So it's really, really good. Like, these high level things that you want to be really cognizant of get surfaced very quickly. When you're trying to create shared understanding or kind of user empathy on your team as well, it can be really useful for that reason that we just saw. When you're not sure where to start, just do a user story map, and that'll at least firstly give you something to do, and it'll give you a good understanding of the product. And sometimes if you're not sure where in the product the problem lies, just getting a good sense of everything will give you a really good thing. Yeah, there's a story there that I can talk about, but my voice is hurting, so I won't talk about it right now. How to use it? Yeah, so list all the users on one side. If you have many users, for example, in that thing we saw, there were multiple users. Write the job to be done that you're hoping to accomplish. What's the outcome at the end? And then ask questions like, start from the beginning, like what happens next? Is that all? And And so if I'm understanding correctly, what happens is, and then you actually talk them through the flow, say the story multiple times. That will really help. As you tell it, and as you reflect people's words back to them, they'll come out with more details. So your job really here is kind of like a journalist or investigator, and you're trying to like piece together what's happened in the story. Am I missing anything? That's a really good one. Like, let me say the whole story back to you, and let's see if it makes sense. Keep it simple to start, and then dive deeper. As necessary, you can do really high level, and then depending on what you're trying to do with it, go deeper. Don't try to get like, this is a thing that you'll have to struggle with. Is like, when do I go deeper? When do I keep it surface level? In general, just start get all the way across. Make sure connect the two, starting and end, and then go deeper. How does it help? Creates user empathy throughout your team. Once they've heard the story, like, it's awesome. Gain alignment and understand products easily at the desired level. So even when someone comes and asks you, hey, what's up with your product? You can show them user story map and talk them through it. You can record a Loom video and or a video like this, and just walk them through the user story map. And that's really helpful. Why does it work? What are the principles at play here? Pictures have a higher bandwidth than words. I think I would start with that. That's probably a bigger one. We're better. It's easier for us to speak and listen than read and write. So often people go through huge trouble to put together all these like big spec documents that nobody ever reads and become horribly out of date because it's really hard to keep them up to date. It's easier to correct mistakes than it is to try to articulate truths. So it's really key when you're building a user story map to show the user what you're writing, show the kind of person that you're talking to. And when stuff is wrong, it's really easy to point it out. It's much harder to say, oh, what's actually going on? So sometimes just make assumptions. Is this what happens? Oh, no, that's not. Okay, great. Then what does? Anchors the entire team on the user's experience. Again, it's like a salient thing. Like the whole thing is built on what the user is going through. And so the likelihood of you building unnecessary features and things that the user doesn't care about is dramatically less if you have a user story map that ends each flow with the job to be done. Yeah. Questions. So now let's go back and see if we can make that user story map better doing jobs to be done. How are we doing on time? I actually don't know. Right. So now let's say can you talk about the last time you sent an email? Like, so why do you send emails, I guess? Like, are there different reasons that you send emails? I can imagine one, like I send emails sometimes to just like communicate something that's super urgent. Sometimes it's like to a number of people, so let's maybe go with the use case that it's something really urgent, right? So what's the need there? The user has, firstly, why is the user using email? That's a good question. Maybe they don't have that person any other way. Like what is the need there? I don't know. Urgency normally comes from some kind of time sensitivity, and so there's some kind of deadline, and so maybe there's some fear of consequences. What happens if that deadline doesn't pass? Like maybe my ticket needs to be rebooked or something, or I'm in some kind of trouble. So maybe fear is something that's going on there. So maybe they're feeling some kind of fear or anxiety. What else? They're looking for reassurance in some way, maybe that the other person has read it and responded and is taking action. What else could there be? Like what else? What could be other needs here? You obviously want that person to kind of you want them to read it as quickly as possible, right? So what are ways in which you could potentially, like, let's say this is kind of, our thing, and we realize this is something that people do a lot, right? One thing would be obviously to go and dig deeper. Like, these are kind of surface level, but certainly we could go deeper and try to figure out what is it that's really driving that. Is there a specific kind of situation that's happening? Can we add notifications or something on the other end? Can we surface the email higher? Are there keywords we can use? Can we, if we have a good understanding of what, depending on how time sensitive it is, could we develop like canned responses and make it really easy for the user to send those emails? If they send them very frequently, like, let's say, I don't know, I have some kind of job, and like, let's say when the system goes down, I need to immediately tell my customer support team so they can kind of support the users. You could, just pre-package that and just have like a button or something, and then do all the other things. You could send them a read receipt. I know that's something that Outlook has, but maybe Gmail doesn't as much. So these are, things like that. And so you'll see, yeah. So that's one way you could do it. Could we make it better now? Login. Maybe we can, we have a special button. Maybe we can create like a different, like, compose emergency email or something. And then instead of there's a click emergency or something, we could have a different button for it. We could pick from templates. If that was a possibility. We could pre-populate the subject with urgent. Something like that, right? What else could we do? Enable read receipts. We could give canned responses for the responder, or put a button in there saying like, yeah, I've read it, and like, yes, no, something like that, right? So yeah, these are potential ways in which you could do it. And then hopefully, then we could make this like whatever. So yeah, the more we can understand, the more we can cater this kind of user. Obviously, as a product matures, they'll probably be doing lots of different jobs, lots of different people. In kind of startups, one really normal thing that we struggle to do is have enough focus. And I suspect this is true of most product orgs. And so figuring out which outcome have we decided is actually the most urgent. And then we focus on that as a way to create maximum value. Yeah. All right. So we've done that. So you can use these two things anywhere. They're foundational. They work together to help you uncover needs and how to plan and build a solution to meet them. There's a lot more to learn. There's multiple books about each of these things, and I'm constantly learning more about them and through using them. And so, yeah, what do you suspect is the best way to learn how to do this better? Yeah, absolutely. It's to use it. It's to rely on your product community and ask them for help. Share lessons with them. Product management's a horribly lonely job, and so having a good kind of team. Lenny Slack community is great. If you're super interested in product, I would really recommend it. It's a really good source of learning. Yeah. So one thing I mentioned earlier but didn't talk a lot about is how jobs to be done can actually help inform user acquisition as well. And so, it sounds like maybe WebEx doesn't do a good job of doing video, so I've just recorded it, and you can go take a look later if you're interested. And here are the resources. And yeah, any final questions? Yeah. And oh yeah, so this is me on LinkedIn and Twitter. Feel free to connect, and I'm always happy to help fellow product folks. Yeah. Any final questions, thoughts, concerns? Okay. With that, I guess I'll hand it back over to Monsi, and I think that's it. Thank you. All right. And with that, I think I'll just hand it over to Monsi to take us through what's next and end. All right. I'm tired. I think it's the third or fourth thing I've recorded today. I have talked a lot. It's 11:50. This thing is at 8 tomorrow, but I think the slides look like they're in pretty good shape. I'm loving the transitions. Oh my God, wait, where is that one? I need to add links there. So now what I'm going to do is listen to this, listen back to what I just recorded. There are a bunch of links that, I mentioned that would be there. So I'll put them on there. And yeah, this is the transition. So beautiful. Love it. All right, going to take a break, come back and do this, and hopefully get to sleep on time. If anyone's watching this in the future, thanks, I guess.